a queen, a seductress, a warrior, a strategist. Cleopatra was many things, but above all, she was a ruler unlike any other. For centuries, her story has been told in whispers of power, romance, and tragedy. But who was the real Cleopatra? Tonight, we journey through the life of Egypt's last pharaoh, separating myth from reality. Before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Bedtime Chronicles for more fascinating stories from history. Now, let's step back in time. Cleopatra's early life and rise to power. Cleopatra VII Philopator was born in 69 BCE in the city of Alexandria, the vibrant cultural and political capital of Egypt. She was a member of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a royal family of Greek origin that had ruled Egypt since the conquests of Alexander the Great. Though Cleopatra is often remembered as an Egyptian queen, she was not ethnically Egyptian. Her family was Macedonian Greek, and they spoke Greek rather than Egyptian. However, Cleopatra would distinguish herself from her predecessors in a way that set her apart. She fully embraced Egyptian culture, presenting herself not as a foreign ruler, but as a true Egyptian pharaoh. The Ptolemies had ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years by the time Cleopatra was born, and their reign was marked by both prosperity and political instability. The dynasty was known for its internal conflicts, with royal family members frequently engaging in power struggles, often leading to betrayal, exile, and even assassination. This culture of political intrigue and ruthless ambition was the world in which Cleopatra was raised, a world where trust was scarce and power was never guaranteed. Cleopatra was the daughter of Ptolemy XII Auletes, also known as the flute player due to his passion for music. His reign was tumultuous, as he faced both internal rebellion and external threats from Rome. To secure his rule, he heavily relied on Roman support, which weakened Egypt's autonomy. His dependency on Rome led to growing resentment among his people, and at one point, he was even exiled from Egypt. However, he managed to reclaim his throne with Roman military assistance, reinforcing Egypt's reliance on Roman power, a relationship that would play a crucial role in Cleopatra's own rule. From an early age, Cleopatra displayed exceptional intelligence, wit, and ambition. Unlike many of her predecessors, she took a genuine interest in Egyptian culture. While most Ptolemaic rulers refused to learn Egyptian and insisted on maintaining their Greek identity, Cleopatra was different. She became the first in her dynasty to learn and fluently speak the Egyptian language, a move that endeared her to the native population. In addition to Egyptian and Greek, she was said to have spoken at least 9 languages, including Latin, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Ethiopian. This ability to communicate with different cultures made her a powerful diplomat. Cleopatra's education was nothing short of extraordinary. She was tutored in science, mathematics, philosophy, rhetoric, and politics, studying under the great scholars of Alexandria, home to the world-renowned Library of Alexandria. She had access to the greatest minds of her time, learning not only how to rule but how to manipulate power effectively. Her knowledge extended beyond governance. She was also well-versed in medicine, astronomy, and economics, making her a remarkably well-rounded ruler. By the time her father, Ptolemy XII, died in 51 BCE, Cleopatra was 18 years old. According to Egyptian custom, she was expected to rule alongside her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII, whom she was forced to marry in accordance with Ptolemaic tradition. However, Cleopatra had no intention of being a figurehead queen. She quickly demonstrated that she would not be controlled by palace officials or her advisors. Instead, she sought to rule independently, making decisions without consulting her younger brother or the powerful courtiers who surrounded him. This defiance sparked immediate conflict between Cleopatra and the royal court, particularly among Ptolemy XIII's influential advisors who sought to control the young king. By 49 BCE, Cleopatra's enemies had gained enough power to force her into exile. she fled to Syria, where she began raising an army to reclaim her throne. Unlike her brother, Cleopatra understood that power was not just about brute force. It was about strategy, alliances, and timing. She patiently waited for the right moment to strike, knowing that one key ally could tip the scales in her favor. Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. Cleopatra's alliance with Julius Caesar was a turning point in both her life and the history of Egypt. By the time Caesar arrived in Alexandria in 48 BCE, Cleopatra was in exile, having been forced out by her brother, Ptolemy XIII, and his powerful advisors. However, she knew that Egypt's fate was closely tied to Rome, and if she wanted to reclaim her throne, she needed the backing of the most powerful man in the world. Caesar had come to Egypt pursuing his great rival, Pompey the Great, after defeating him at the Battle of Pharsalus during Rome's civil war. Pompey had sought refuge in Egypt, hoping for an alliance with Ptolemy XIII. Instead, in an effort to curry favor with Caesar, Ptolemy's advisors betrayed and murdered Pompey, presenting his severed head to Caesar upon his arrival. However, instead of gratitude, Caesar was outraged. Pompey had been a Roman consul, a man of great influence, and his brutal execution was an affront to Roman dignity. This was a major political blunder by Ptolemy XIII's advisors, and Cleopatra saw an opportunity to turn it to her advantage. Though she had been exiled to Syria, Cleopatra was determined to meet Caesar in person. However, her brother's forces controlled Alexandria, making it nearly impossible for her to enter the palace openly. Instead, she devised an audacious plan, one that would go down in history. According to legend, Cleopatra had herself smuggled into Caesar's private chambers wrapped inside a carpet, or, in some accounts, a linen sack. When the carpet was unrolled before him, Cleopatra emerged, fully dressed as a queen, radiating confidence and charisma. This was not just a stunt, it was a masterstroke of diplomacy and theatrics. Cleopatra knew how to command attention, and she understood the power of first impressions. Caesar, despite being more than 30 years her senior, was immediately intrigued by her intelligence, ambition, and boldness. She wasn't just beautiful, she was shrewd, eloquent, and politically astute. Unlike other women in Caesar's life, Cleopatra was a ruler in her own right, someone who could match him in wit and strategy. Their alliance was both romantic and political. Cleopatra needed Caesar's military strength to reclaim Egypt, while Caesar saw great value in supporting Cleopatra. Egypt was one of the richest lands in the Mediterranean, a vital source of grain, and securing it under a ruler loyal to him would benefit Rome. Caesar declared Cleopatra the rightful queen, leading to a confrontation between his forces and those loyal to Ptolemy XIII. This led to the Alexandrian War, a brutal conflict between Caesar and Ptolemy's supporters. Cleopatra's brother, despite having the advantage of numbers, was no match for Caesar's battle-hardened Roman legions. After months of fighting, Ptolemy XIII's army was defeated, and as he attempted to escape across the Nile, he drowned in the river. With her brother dead, Cleopatra regained her throne, this time as the undisputed ruler of Egypt. To solidify her rule, she followed the Ptolemaic tradition of co-rulership, marrying her younger brother Ptolemy XIV, though he held little power in reality. Cleopatra's real partner was now Julius Caesar. The relationship between Cleopatra and Caesar caused a sensation. In 47 BCE, she gave birth to a son, Ptolemy XV, better known as Caesarion, which means Little Caesar. Cleopatra openly claimed that Caesar was the father, and while Caesar never officially acknowledged the child, many in Rome saw Caesarion as his heir. Cleopatra's time with Caesar was marked by a lavish and extravagant lifestyle. She traveled to Rome in 46 BCE, staying in one of Caesar's grand villas and was introduced to Roman society. Her presence shocked the Roman elite. She was a foreign queen, immensely wealthy, and unlike the demure Roman women, Cleopatra exuded power and independence. She openly presented herself as the new Isis, associating herself with the Egyptian goddess of motherhood and wisdom. However, Cleopatra's influence in Rome also made her a target of political enemies. Many Romans saw her as a threat to Roman values, fearing that she was manipulating Caesar and might try to elevate Caesarion as his successor. This was especially concerning to the Roman Senate, as Caesar already had an official heir, his great-nephew Octavian. The idea of an Egyptian queen shaping Roman politics was deeply unsettling to the conservative elite. In 44 BCE, tragedy struck when Julius Caesar was assassinated by a group of senators on the Ides of March. His murder threw Rome into chaos, and for Cleopatra, it was a devastating loss. Cleopatra and Mark Antony. After the assassination of Julius Caesar, Cleopatra found herself in a precarious position. Her most powerful ally was dead, and Rome was thrown into chaos as rival factions fought for control. The main contenders for power were Octavian, Caesar's adopted son and heir, and Mark Antony, one of Caesar's most trusted generals. Cleopatra knew that her survival depended on aligning with the right leader, someone who could protect her and ensure Egypt remained independent. At first, Cleopatra remained cautious. She had already returned to Egypt after Caesar's death, where she secured her rule by eliminating her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, likely through poisoning, so that she could install her son Caesarion as her co-ruler. By doing so, Cleopatra aimed to solidify her dynasty, presenting Caesarion as the legitimate heir to Julius Caesar. This move was politically strategic, as many in the Roman world still saw Caesar as a great leader, and linking herself to his legacy gave Cleopatra an advantage. Meanwhile, Rome descended into a brutal civil war between Octavian and Mark Antony on one side, and Caesar's assassins, Brutus and Cassius, on the other. The battle culminated in 42 BCE at the Battle of Philippi, where Antony and Octavian emerged victorious. With the assassins defeated, Rome's two strongest men now divided the empire. Octavian took control of the west, while Antony ruled the east. Egypt, situated in the heart of the eastern Mediterranean, was now under Mark Antony's sphere of influence. In 41 BCE, he summoned Cleopatra to the city of Tarsus in modern-day Turkey, seeking her loyalty and financial support for his upcoming campaigns. But Cleopatra, ever the strategist, knew that this was an opportunity not just to offer her support, but to gain an ally as well. According to ancient sources, Cleopatra made an unforgettable entrance when she arrived in Tarsus. She sailed up the Cydnus River on a magnificent barge, adorned in gold and purple, with sails perfumed with incense. She had styled herself as the goddess Aphrodite, reclining under a golden canopy, while attendants dressed as Eros and nymphs surrounded her. Antony, known for his love of excess and grandeur, was immediately enchanted. Cleopatra's theatrics were not just for show, they were calculated diplomacy. She knew how to command attention and impress powerful men, and Antony was no exception. Their meeting quickly turned into a passionate love affair, but beneath the romance, their alliance was built on political necessity. Antony needed Cleopatra's vast wealth to fund his military campaigns, especially his planned invasion of Parthia, Rome's great eastern rival. Cleopatra, in turn, needed Antony's military support to maintain her grip on Egypt and expand her influence. Their relationship was not just about personal attraction, it was about power, survival, and ambition. Over the next few years, Antony spent more and more time in Alexandria, living in luxury with Cleopatra. Unlike Octavian, who was known for his rigid discipline, Antony embraced the Egyptian way of life, indulging in the extravagant culture of the Ptolemaic court. Together they formed a secret society known as the Inimitable Livers, dedicated to feasting, drinking, and revelry. Cleopatra and Antony enjoyed games of disguise, sometimes wandering the streets of Alexandria in disguise to play pranks on commoners. But while their relationship may have been filled with romance and revelry, it was also deeply political. In 37 BCE, Antony married Octavia, Octavian's sister, in an attempt to maintain peace between the two factions in Rome. Cleopatra, however, remained his true partner. Even though Antony was officially married to Octavia, he continued his relationship with Cleopatra, who gave birth to twins, a boy named Alexander Helios and a girl named Cleopatra Selene. By 34 BCE, Antony openly declared his loyalty to Cleopatra and divorced Octavia, a move that angered Octavian and sparked open hostility. That same year, Antony staged a grand ceremony in Alexandria, known as the Donations of Alexandria. During this event, he bestowed vast territories upon Cleopatra and their children, giving them control over much of the eastern Mediterranean. Cleopatra was officially named Queen of Kings, and Caesarion was declared the legitimate son of Julius Caesar and the rightful ruler of Rome. This was a direct challenge to Octavian's authority. Octavian had built his power on the claim that he was Caesar's rightful heir, and Antony's actions threatened that. Octavian seized on the opportunity to portray Antony as a traitor, claiming that Cleopatra had bewitched him and that he was no longer loyal to Rome. In 32 BCE, Octavian used Antony's relationship with Cleopatra as propaganda, declaring that Antony had been corrupted by the foreign queen and planned to make Alexandria the new capital of the Roman Empire. This set the stage for one of the most famous battles in history, the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. Octavian, now the undisputed leader of Rome, declared war on Cleopatra, knowing that Antony would stand by her side. The battle took place off the coast of Greece, with Octavian's fleet facing off against the combined forces of Antony and Cleopatra. Antony's forces were outmaneuvered, and in the heat of battle, Cleopatra fled with her ships back to Egypt. Seeing her retreat, Antony followed, abandoning the fight. Cleopatra's tragic end. By 30 BCE, Cleopatra's world was crumbling around her. The once mighty queen of Egypt had seen her power and influence decline as Octavian, the future Augustus Caesar, tightened his grip on the Roman world. Her longtime ally and lover, Mark Antony, had been defeated at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, and now Octavian's legions were marching toward Alexandria. The fate of Cleopatra, and of Egypt itself, was hanging by a thread. Cleopatra had spent nearly 2 decades navigating the treacherous world of Roman politics, forming alliances with some of the most powerful men in history. She had been Caesar's lover, Antony's partner, and Egypt's last independent ruler. But despite her strategic mind and unmatched intelligence, she now found herself cornered, with few options left. As Octavian's army approached Alexandria, Antony, desperate and broken, tried to rally his remaining forces for one last stand. But by this point, most of his troops deserted him, defecting to Octavian's side. Cleopatra, ever the pragmatist, began negotiating in secret, hoping to secure a deal with Octavian that would allow her to retain some form of power or at least protect her children. However, Octavian was unforgiving. He saw Cleopatra as a threat to Rome's stability and had no intention of allowing her to remain queen. Mark Antony's death. As defeat became inevitable, Mark Antony received false news that Cleopatra had taken her own life. According to legend, a messenger arrived at Antony's camp, informing him that Cleopatra had locked herself inside her tomb and allowed herself to die. Believing this to be true, Antony was overcome with grief. He had lost not only the battle, but also the woman he loved. In a moment of despair, Antony fell on his own sword, intending to die a warrior's death. But the wound was not immediately fatal. As he lay bleeding, another messenger arrived. Cleopatra was still alive. Realizing his mistake, Antony begged to be taken to her. Cleopatra, upon hearing of Antony's condition, ordered her servants to bring him to her tomb. Antony was carried into her presence, weak and dying. In his final moments, Cleopatra cradled him in her arms, weeping as he gasped his last words. According to some accounts, Antony professed his undying love for Cleopatra and urged her to make peace with Octavian before drawing his final breath. With Antony dead, Cleopatra was now truly alone. Cleopatra's last attempt to negotiate. Cleopatra knew that her fate was in Octavian's hands, and she desperately tried to bargain for her life and the future of her children. She met with Octavian face to face, attempting to charm him as she had once charmed Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. She reminded him of Egypt's wealth and offered to step down from the throne peacefully, perhaps even hoping for an arrangement that would allow her to rule under Rome's oversight. But Octavian was not easily swayed. Unlike Caesar and Antony, he was cold and calculating, immune to her charisma. He made it clear that she would not remain queen, and though he did not immediately order her execution, he planned to take her to Rome as a war trophy, parading her through the streets in a Roman triumph. For Cleopatra, this was a fate worse than death. The thought of being humiliated before the Roman people, reduced to a mere spectacle for Octavian's victory, was unbearable. She had ruled as a queen, presented herself as a living goddess, and spent her life shaping history. She would not allow herself to be reduced to a prisoner. Cleopatra's death. Fact or myth? Determined to die on her own terms, Cleopatra began preparing for her final act. She retreated to her tomb, where she dressed herself in royal robes, adorned herself with her most precious jewels, and sent a final letter to Octavian requesting to be buried beside Mark Antony. Shortly afterward, Cleopatra was found dead in her chamber. How she died remains one of history's greatest mysteries. The most famous version of the story claims that Cleopatra allowed herself to be bitten by an asp, a venomous Egyptian cobra. The snake, which was a symbol of divine royalty in Egyptian culture, would have killed her swiftly and painlessly. Ancient historians like Plutarch and Dio Cassius recount that 2 small puncture wounds were found on her arm, suggesting that she had indeed died from snake venom. However, modern historians debate this account. Some believe that the idea of a dramatic suicide by snakebite was a later myth, created to romanticize Cleopatra's death. The logistical challenges of smuggling a deadly snake into her guarded chamber also raise questions about the story's plausibility. An alternative theory suggests that Cleopatra poisoned herself, either by drinking a lethal concoction or using a poisoned hairpin or ointment. Some sources claim that she had studied various poisons and their effects, ensuring that she would die quickly and painlessly. Whatever the method, Cleopatra's death was her final act of defiance. She would not be paraded through Rome as a prisoner. She had lived as a queen, and she chose to die as one. The aftermath of Cleopatra's death. When Octavian received news of Cleopatra's death, he was reportedly disappointed. He had wanted to parade her through Rome as a symbol of his victory, just as his great-uncle Julius Caesar had done with other defeated rulers. However, Cleopatra's final act robbed him of this triumph. With Cleopatra gone, Egypt officially became a province of Rome. Octavian ordered the execution of Caesarion, eliminating the last direct heir of Julius Caesar. However, Cleopatra's children with Mark Antony, Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus were spared. They were taken to Rome and raised by Octavia, Antony's former wife and Octavian's sister. Cleopatra Selene would later become Queen of Mauritania, ensuring that Cleopatra's bloodline lived on. Cleopatra's legacy and myths. Cleopatra's story did not end with her death in 30 BCE. In many ways, her legend only grew stronger after she was gone. She was the last pharaoh of Egypt, a woman who stood against the might of Rome and left an indelible mark on history. But over the centuries, her image has been shaped, distorted, and reinvented, sometimes as a cunning seductress, sometimes as a brilliant ruler, and sometimes as a tragic lover. Her true legacy is far greater than the myths that have surrounded her for over 2 millennia. Was she really the great beauty history claims? Was she merely a manipulator, or was she a visionary leader? And what remains of her kingdom today? The political genius of Cleopatra. Despite the way she has often been depicted, Cleopatra was first and foremost a ruler. She was not simply the lover of Julius Caesar or Mark Antony. She was a queen fighting for the survival of her country in an era when powerful men dominated the world. One of Cleopatra's most remarkable achievements was her ability to maintain Egypt's independence for as long as she did. By the time she came to power, Egypt was surrounded by Rome, an expanding empire that had already turned many once great kingdoms into provinces. Instead of being conquered outright, Cleopatra played the game of diplomacy, carefully choosing her alliances and using her intelligence, charm, and strategy to ensure that Egypt remained sovereign for decades. She also worked to revitalize Egypt's economy. Under her rule, Egypt's agriculture flourished, and she implemented policies that strengthened trade and increased the wealth of her kingdom. She understood the importance of controlling resources, and she made sure that Egypt remained the breadbasket of the Mediterranean, providing grain to Rome and other regions. But Cleopatra was not just a shrewd politician. She was also a patron of the arts and sciences. She invested in the Library of Alexandria, one of the greatest centers of knowledge in the ancient world. She spoke multiple languages, allowing her to communicate with different cultures and gain the respect of foreign rulers. Unlike her Ptolemaic predecessors, who ruled as Greek overlords, Cleopatra fully embraced Egyptian culture, presenting herself as the reincarnation of Isis, a divine ruler who was deeply connected to her people. Was Cleopatra truly beautiful? The myth versus reality. One of the most enduring myths about Cleopatra is that she was an extraordinarily beautiful woman who used her looks to seduce powerful men. But was this actually true? Ancient Roman writers, especially those hostile to her, often emphasized her seductive nature rather than her intellect and political skill. The idea of a foreign queen who manipulated Roman leaders was useful propaganda for Octavian, who wanted to justify his war against her and Antony. By reducing Cleopatra to a femme fatale, he could portray Antony as weak and corrupted rather than a legitimate rival for power. However, historical evidence suggests a different picture. Coins from Cleopatra's reign depict her with a prominent nose, strong jawline, and sharp features, far from the delicate beauty often shown in movies. Some scholars believe she may have deliberately chosen this striking image to appear more authoritative. Instead of relying on mere physical beauty, Cleopatra's real power was in her charisma, intelligence, and ability to command respect. Ancient sources, including the historian Plutarch, state that her beauty was not her defining feature. Instead, it was her voice, her wit, and her ability to captivate those around her that made her truly extraordinary. Cleopatra in Roman propaganda. After Cleopatra's death, Octavian, later Augustus Caesar, controlled how history remembered her. He needed to justify his conquest of Egypt, and he did this by portraying Cleopatra as a dangerous foreign queen who had bewitched Mark Antony and threatened Rome itself. Roman writers like Dio Cassius and Horace described her as a seductress who used her beauty and feminine wiles to manipulate powerful men. This idea reinforced Roman values, which placed men as rulers and women as passive figures. Cleopatra's independence, intelligence, and power made her a threat, so Roman historians reduced her to a cautionary tale. This propaganda was highly effective. For centuries, Cleopatra was seen primarily as a woman who caused the downfall of men, rather than a ruler who fought to preserve her kingdom. Cleopatra in literature and art. Despite the Roman smear campaign, Cleopatra's story continued to fascinate generations of writers and artists. One of the most famous depictions of her came from Shakespeare's play Antony and Cleopatra, 1607. In the play, Cleopatra is a passionate and dramatic queen, torn between love and duty. Shakespeare helped cement her image as a tragic figure, a woman ruled by emotion rather than strategy. During the Renaissance and beyond, Cleopatra was often depicted in romanticized paintings, showing her as an exotic beauty in lavish Egyptian attire. Many artists focused on her final moments, portraying her dramatic suicide by snakebite. This image became one of the most famous representations of Cleopatra, reinforcing the idea of her as a doomed lover rather than a powerful leader. Hollywood's Cleopatra, fact or fiction? In the 20th century, Cleopatra became a pop culture icon thanks to Hollywood's fascination with her story. Films like Cleopatra, 1963, starring Elizabeth Taylor, presented her as a glamorous, seductive queen dressed in extravagant costumes. While visually stunning, these portrayals often distorted history, making Cleopatra more of a romantic heroine than a political mastermind. Movies and television have shaped the modern perception of Cleopatra, reinforcing certain myths while largely ignoring her true accomplishments. While Cleopatra was undoubtedly a woman who knew how to use diplomacy and personal relationships to her advantage, she was also one of the most intelligent and capable rulers of the ancient world, a side of her that is often overlooked in popular culture. The search for Cleopatra's tomb. One of the greatest mysteries of Cleopatra's life remains her final resting place. Although she requested to be buried alongside Mark Antony, the exact location of their tomb has never been found. For centuries, scholars and archaeologists have searched for her lost tomb, believing it to be somewhere near Alexandria. Some theories suggest that it may lie beneath the modern city, while others propose that Cleopatra and Antony were buried in a temple complex near Taposiris Magna, west of Alexandria. In recent years, archaeologist Kathleen Martinez has led excavations in the region, uncovering clues that suggest the tomb may still exist. If Cleopatra's burial site is ever discovered, it could rewrite what we know about her, and perhaps even reveal secrets lost to history. A queen beyond time. Over 2,000 years after her death, Cleopatra remains one of the most famous women in history. She has been remembered as a ruler, a lover, a seductress, a strategist, and a tragic figure. But above all, she was a queen who defied expectations, a woman who stood against the greatest empire the world had ever known and fought until the very end. Her legacy is not just one of romance and intrigue, but of power, intelligence, and resilience. Cleopatra was not merely a woman who loved powerful men. She was a powerful ruler in her own right, a figure who shaped history and whose name will never be forgotten. What do you think? Was Cleopatra a political genius, a romantic figure, or something else entirely? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Bedtime Chronicles for more stories of legends, mysteries, and the great figures of the past. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.